So when Irene asked me to talk about divine silence tonight, I have to admit that I felt a little daunted because I wasn't really sure what we meant by that, because I feel this deep silence even when there's music playing, divine silence when music is playing. So I had to think about it a lot. Had to read a little bit about it, and so this is what I came up with. So I've run 3 marathons in my life. The first one was when I was 39, the last just a couple of years after that. I began running half marathons after that. But these days I generally walk. And I generally walk each year the Race to Roby. So that's a lot of fun. But my body thanks me that I'm not running anymore. But training for a half marathon is a lot more civilized than training for a marathon, for those of you who've done it. And I remember when I first started getting ready for these marathons, these long Saturdays when you ran the whole day, and people would ask me, "Don't you get bored? Don't you get bored?" And I said to them, "Why should I be bored? I'm the most interesting person I know." But over the years, I realized that I'm not all that interesting. But what's really going on is that I am interested. I pay more attention these days to all that around me is fascinating. And the absence of human-made noise gives me the opportunity to experience this fully. When we're quiet enough to give ourselves the opportunity to experience something much deeper than we normally do, and whether or not we believe in the divine, we may find ourselves experiencing it, immersed in it. Beneath this busy, quizzy, dizzy lifestyle we lead, all in a tizzy, there is the peaceful calm, the slowing depth that calls to depth that we read about in Psalms 42:7. As contemplatives, we can think of silence as ordinary or divine. Ordinary silence means there's no noise, or more practically, no human-made noise. Divine silence for us is that experience where we find ourselves immersed in something larger than ourselves. When in the quiet of our minds we feel present and a presence. That's divine silence. And we can find it on the meditation cushion, walking on the trail, snuggling with our puppy, watching the clouds on a summer day. A person who's developed inner peace might be surrounded by cacophony and yet carry inner silence at the same time. Brother David Stendhal Rast, one of my favorite authors, writing about gratitude, he says about silence, he talks about God singing. Just think of that, God singing. The singing, he says, can be as jubilant as the red of God-made tomatoes, as the soaring of a kite or the splashing of children in a pool. The singing is my heart's joyous response, but God's singing can also be as heavy as the fragrance of lilies in a funeral home, heavy as the news of a friend's grief. God's singing can be as light as harpsichord music, or a spring outing as sad as the howling of the night train, or the evening news. Can be cheerful, enchanting, challenging, amusing. In everything we experience, we can hear God singing if we listen attentively. Isn't that something to think about, listening to God singing? He said, silence, too, in this sense, is not the absence of sound or word. He said it's not characterized by absence, but by presence. A presence too great for words. Mystery is not an emptiness, but the incomprehensible presence that touches us and renders us speechless as it imparts its meaning. And perhaps that's why music, I say this with all these wonderful musicians around me, perhaps that's why music, so full of sound, so full of joy and tragedy and majesty, discord and harmony, can call out this presence, this divine silence. Martin Laird, in his wonderful book, The Silent Land, said, "We are built for contemplation. And this joy that is silent is already within us. Its discovery is precious beyond compare. And that means we are all built to experience divine silence. Max Picard said, silence can exist without speech. And just imagine all the silence and all of infinity all around us. Came before speech, came before words, came before religion, came before doctrine, dogma, laws, Republicans, Democrats. Silence can exist without speech, but speech cannot exist without silence. And silence is never more audible than when the last sound of music has died away. The divine silence is available to everyone, regardless of age, education, religious domination, whether you're an outcast or an incast, wherever you are, no matter what your belief system. And I'll finish with one of my favorite quotes about silence. It's often attributed to Rumi, although no one can actually find it all the way back into what he actually said. And that is, silence is the language of God. All else is poor translation. So if silence is God's language, and we can hear, as David Stiller-Rast says, God singing silence through all of nature, well, we have a lot to listen for. And we have a lot to be interested in.